Hello and welcome to Inside Music, episode number 68. I'm your host, James Shotwell, and on this episode, I'm chatting with my good friend, John MacPhee of Paper Lions. Now, I know you don't all know Paper Lions, and that seems to be something I start every episode with, saying, I know that you don't all know this group. And I guess that's true for every artist, but that is especially true with this episode because Paper Lions, despite having been together for well over a decade, are still working to establish themselves as a household name. And that doesn't mean the band isn't successful. They have fans all over the globe. They've played all over the globe. They tour regularly. They release music regularly. This band is a full-time group. However, for one reason or another, they just never really burst out on the international radar the way some of their genre peers have. And I think that time is still coming because the band was nice enough to let me hear some rough demos of their upcoming full-length album due out at the end of the year. And that is why we're having this conversation now, because I heard those songs and I was blown away. So I thought, hey, why not squeeze in a little discovery episode in between all these big musicians that we've had on the show as of late? Because we have a lot of big guests on the show, and I'm very thankful for that. And if I could tell you everyone that's going to be on the show between now and the end of May, your head might explode. But I want to make sure that we never lose focus from the people who are still trying to establish themselves as having this lasting presence within the music industry. And Paper Lions are kind of unique because on one hand, they have done that. They're able to be full-time musicians who tour and record music however they feel is they're meant to do so, and they're happy with their lives. And that's really all you can ever seek in this industry. But, even if you reach that point, there's still a little piece of you that hopes, everyone's mom knows who you are at the end of the day, or that when all is said and done, you have some legacy in the industry. And I feel like Paper Lions are right on the cusp of establishing this lasting legacy in music, and this new album could do it. But people need to know that it's coming out, and that's why this episode is happening. So you're going to hear me talk with John about the history of Paper Lions, how they found their sound, where the new material is coming from, and what the band hopes to do going into the future. This is a big episode, all intended for discovery. I want you to discover Paper Lions. I want you to love Paper Lions, and I'm hoping by the end of this episode of the show, you will feel that way. Before we get there, however, I do need to tell you about our sponsor. This episode of Inside Music, like all episodes of Inside Music, is brought to you by Holix, the music industry's leading digital promotional distribution provider. And what that means is that Holix works with managers, publicists, record labels, and independent artists all over the world to help share new and unreleased music with members of the industry at large without fear of piracy. Should leaks occur, Holix has a wide array of state-of-the-art tools that can help not only stop the spread of unwanted files online, but also track down the people responsible for the leaks. For more information on Holix and access to a free 30-day trial, visit holix.com. That's HAULIX.com. You should also be following Holix on Twitter, as well as the podcast. Yes, the podcast has a Twitter account. It's at Inside Music Pod. That's at Inside Music Pod. We post updates about what's happening on the show, who's going to be on the show in coming weeks, some need-to-know music industry stuff, as well as a lot of advice columns and editorials connected to the Holix blog. It's a fun account, and you should join the conversation. Lastly, 2 appearances on the horizon. First up, Holix Live is going to be at Launch Music Conference. That's April 21st through the 23rd in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I, James, am going to be on site doing some mentoring with artists and aspiring industry professionals, and I'd love to meet you. If you're not able to make it out to Lancaster, Pennsylvania this month, next month you can see me in Nashville at the Music Biz Conference. That takes place May 16th, 17th, and 18th. That's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so you might need to ask some time off work or take some time off school. But if you show up, I'm hosting a panel on the future of piracy and our hopes to end it through our work here at Holix with Jenna Pell from Catalyst Publicity Group, Maria Garonas from Raby Publicity, and Will Pugh from Cartel. Yes, the front man of Cartel on a panel about ending music piracy. It's going to be a good time, and I'd love to see all of you there. So for more information on that, I believe you have to visit musicbiz.com. Or just search Music Biz Conference, Music Biz Summit, and you will find more information. So I've told you the sponsor, told you to follow at Inside Music Pod on Twitter. I've told you about our live appearances. You know who the guest is. Yeah, I think we're ready for the show. So I'm going to play a little bit of music off one of the songs from Paper Lions' upcoming album, and then we're going to get to the conversation with John. Be on the lookout for more episodes of the show coming in the coming days and weeks. But for right now, enjoy the show.
You were broken and battered, cold and afraid of the night, lonely and shattered. Oh, I never felt the way that I'm feeling tonight. Baby, got me feeling alright now. I can feel it, I can feel it, I can feel it. Deep down in my bones, can get your head around what your heart already knows. I can see it, I can see it, I can see it. In the way that you move, can see a better when I get a look at you. Take a look if you wanna feel.
So, where am I speaking to you from today? Are you home?
Yes, yeah, home on Prince Edward Island.
I gotta tell you, I actually had to Google Prince Edward Island to learn more about it this morning. I was getting ready to do this the other day, and I wrote down Belfast PEI, and this morning I found myself being like, "What does PEI stand for? I thought these guys are from Canada." And I was like, yes, Prince Edward Island. My Americanism is showing through, and I apologize.
Well, we are a very small island. I'm not surprised. We have a couple of notable exports that some folks might be aware of. Anne of Green Gables, of course, very famous book series, and we export a lot of potatoes and lobster. So you might be snacking on island lobster or island potatoes and be unaware that they originated in Prince Edward Island. But beyond that, we are not very well known.
Is that where you grew up, or is Prince Edward Island home your whole life?
Born in Ontario, in a town called Cornwall, but only lived there for 3 years, so have no real memory of it. Prince Edward Island is all I know regarding growing up.
And it seems like you're a lifer at this point.
Yeah, I think so. My wife and I just bought an old rectory, a Catholic house for a priest, and in Iona, which is a small village, actually really close to Belfast, where I grew up. And it's this beautiful old house, tons of character and charm, and we're just in the midst of moving in right now. So it does look like we'll be set here for life.
Now, when you were growing up, did you ever think that was going to be the case, that you were going to stay on this little island of yours for your adulthood, or did you picture the running away to the rock and roll scenes of big cities and all that jazz?
I never really thought about it, to be honest. We were always very happy here growing up, but as far as looking to the future, where would I put down roots? It was not something that had really crossed my mind, and really only as of late have I sort of been faced with thinking, where am I going to spend my days? Where am I going to raise my family? Where am I going to live out? And of course, with the purchase of this house, it's kind of cemented what I've been coming to realize, which is that Prince Edward Island is a great place to live and to grow and to create and to raise a family. And so here we are.
Well, that's great to hear, man. It is funny how as you start to get older, your brain kind of starts to rewire in a way that makes you think about that stuff more and more. It's strange. It happens very naturally, at least in my own discovery. It's just you kind of find yourself thinking about it more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with you.
Well, something I'm always curious about, I happen to be a fan of a lot of Canadian artists, and something that always strikes me as interesting is what the local music scenes are like up there, because it seems like every province people in different provinces, they all have different local music scenes and how their kind of music communities work. So what was it like growing up on Prince Edward Island and having this interest in music that you guys had? Like, what was the local community like in terms of music and maybe concerts, or was there concerts? How did that all function?
Well, we grew up, three of us, in Belfast, which is a village just of a couple hundred people. And our drummer, David, grew up in Brudenell, which is another small town, maybe 20 minutes from where we were. And there wasn't really a scene per se. I mean, music for us growing up was, choir at church, and we had a 20-minute music class at our elementary school every day, where we would sort of sing, East Coast folk songs. So that was the extent of it. I mean, my father had a couple of records. We had a record player. I remember, in our old summer farmhouse, we came across, I think, a greatest hits of Rod Stewart, Janis Joplin, and the Beatles' Abbey Road records, and we put those on, and I mean, you know, we were blown away by them. And it was just the greatest thing ever. But really, the first sort of concert experience, real proper concert experience we had was at the racetrack in our capital city. There was a festival that came to town called Great Big Picnic, and it was a one-day concert hosted by a band called Great Big Sea, who were quite successful at the time, East Coast kind of folk rock act. And they headlined and then sort of had a series of their friends playing throughout the day. And I was, I think, 12 at the time. And I'm actually, looking back, surprised my parents let me go, but I went with my older brothers, and they sort of kept watch of me throughout the day. And it was just an incredible experience as a 12-year-old, you know, being in a crowd of, you know, there might have been 2,000 or 3,000 people there. And I was quite a big fan of the band at the time, and knew, you know, most of the hits that they were playing. That was sort of my first introduction to a live show experience, and it was an incredible introduction.
So then when did you and your brother, would you say, kind of when did you guys start to play music together? When did you start maybe thinking about starting a band together?
My brother got his first drum kit, although he's not the drummer in the band, but he's always loved the drums. And he got his first drum kit, I think, when I was 11 or 12. And he got it all set up. And I remember he did have an electric guitar, and he sat down and he taught me the 4 chords to Smells Like Teen Spirits so that he could play the drums to them. And that was sort of our first jam session, whatever that was, 18 years ago. And sort of the natural progression was then teaching our next door neighbor Colin guitar as well, taught him a couple of chords, and then we all jammed together. And that was sort of the beginning of it. We would learn songs and play them together. Colin and I started taking guitar lessons from the same teacher. And then we would, you know, just learn from each other, introduce each other's songs and jam. And that was sort of our junior high and high school years.
So let's talk about the Chucky Danger Band, which is kind of, at least from what I understand, like Paper Lions 1.0. Would that be accurate to describe it that way?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so when did the band come together? Where were you at in life, I guess, when the band started to come together, I should say?
Well, we had, like I said, jammed together quite a bit, although, you know, nothing really official. Until after high school, for myself, I had done some traveling, went away with an organization called Youth with a Mission. It's like this, it's like a mission organization, and traveled to Cambodia. I was bizarrely teaching this, or like helping teach this cooking class. I quite liked cooking at the time, and was sort of teaching some basic cooking skills to some folks there. It's kind of strange looking back on it, how I landed in that. But anyway, through that, you know, had this sort of, you know, teenage crisis, was very lonely and really thrown into a very angsty situation. And, you know, I would not have pegged myself as a very emotive person, and was put into the situation where I was feeling these sort of extreme emotions, and ended up writing a bunch of songs. That sort of became my outlet to deal with it. Had never really written songs before that, certainly never written any lyrics. And so came home from that time as an 18-year-old with these, you know, 10 or 11 songs that I'd worked on, and I showed them to Rob and Colin, you know, who I had a history of jamming with, and they thought, you know, these are actually not that bad. We should, you know, we should flesh them out and perform them. so that was sort of the beginning of Chucky Danger. Those songs. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. You finish your thought.
No, I was just going to say those songs actually. We spent a summer at a local theater performing those songs, and the culmination of that summer was actually recording them live. It was like the first recorded piece that we'd done called Live at the Guild. It's crazy. Like, we were this band 3 months old, and our first recording was a live record. And listening back, actually, it's not that embarrassing, which, you know, is pretty impressive. Like, for 18 and 19-year-olds, 3 months together, you know, pulling off a live recording. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's bad, but it's not that embarrassing.
Of course. Well, it's good that you can look back on it and, you know, still feel good about it, because there are plenty of artists that have the opposite be true, where they're like, oh, we would never want anyone to hear those early recordings. Well, let me ask you this. What is the story behind the name? Where does Chucky Danger come from?
Well, you know, it was just sort of a goofy name. We were, like, you know, I wouldn't say ruled by humor, but of course everything is humorous when you're 18. And so that name, I think it was a joke that one of our friends wanted to name his first child Chucky Danger. And that just sort of stuck with us. We thought that was quite funny. And so we just thought, well, let's use it as a band name. But of course, no one thought we would be doing this for the amount of time that we have been. To us, this was like a couple of months project, and so we didn't put a lot of thought into anything we were doing in those first few months. And so Chucky Danger was a product of that. That said, I mean, some people love the name. We always thought it was kind of silly, but there are still diehards to this day, you know, who are with us from the beginning and say, like, you know, love the band, but I miss the old name. That's your prerogative, I guess.
Well, would you say that the band in the early form sounded a lot like Paper Lions do today? So I'll be honest with you, I was really getting into Paper Lions. I was going back, and I didn't even realize that there was this other life of the band as the Chucky Danger Band. So I haven't even had a ton of time to dig into that material yet. So is it sound like an earlier version of who you are now, or is it a completely different band?
There are definitely similarities. I mean, we've always been a pop rock band, sort of, you know, guitar, piano, bass, drums, vocals. Probably the vocal styling would be, you know, I'm sure you could trace along the progression. Of course, it's me and my brother singing for 10 years, so your voice naturally changes some, but I think it still sounds like us to a degree. Yeah, so I don't think anyone would be shocked to hear the old material, but certainly there's a natural progression that occurred, that if you listen to the first record and then you listen to this record we're about to put out, it might be quite a jump, but if you traced it along from record to record, I don't think it would be that alarming of a change.
Now, when you talk about that, your first record, your first full length was called Color, and it came, or I guess it's Two Brothers, a Major and a Minor. Is that a full length as well?
That's that live record.
That's the live record.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the first full length is Color, and now this new album coming out 10 years later than Color is called Full Color. Did you intentionally do this to be some bookends to this period in your life?
No, it was funny, actually. We didn't even realize that when we came up with the album title, and then somebody pointed it out to us. You know, somebody who works with the band, and we're like, oh, yeah, interesting. No, none of us really thought about that, but it's a happy accident, I'd say, and certainly, while unintentional, there, you know, you could, what would you say? You could draw certain things out of that. Maybe subliminally there was stuff going on we didn't realize, but it's certainly interesting to think about. And but beyond that, I don't really know, because it was an accident.
Well, a happy accident at least. It definitely, it's going to be a stuff of fan lore for years to come. You know, people try to break that down. I know I did as soon as I put it together because you guys have been nice enough to let me hear some of the mixes of the new album, and so I tried to go back and compare the two, and I was like, are they trying to say something here? Are these continuations of the ideas on Color? I got way into it. So if you want to play it up that way, you could.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, we may. As time goes on, we may discover the meaning in it for ourselves, and
True.
sort of we may start to drink the Kool-Aid, if you will, start to dive in and figure out what were we thinking,
Well, can you take me back to when Chucky Danger Band became Paper Lions? Because I'm always interested in when a band decides to change their name, because it definitely kind of gives them not that you even needed a second chance at life, because the Chucky Danger Band had found success. So I'm curious, what led you to change the band name? And I guess we'll kind of go from there and talk about maybe how the differences you experienced. But what was the initial inspiration to become Paper Lions?
The big thing that was going on with us was, I think it's sort of rooted in rebellion. We had found success as Chucky Danger, but it had come in a way that I'm not sure any of us were completely comfortable owning. And probably looking back, we found success a little too quickly. I mean, it wasn't, of course, it was regional success, but at the time it felt like a big deal. And I think because we sort of found ourselves in that situation, then you had to sort of start, we were faced with this kind of, we either need to own it or we need to dump it. And so being in our early 20s, we dumped it. There wasn't this kind of, it was very hard for us to deal with it in a, what would you say, not a gentle fashion, but kind of like a logical, well thought out, sort of it was hard for us to process what we were going through in a healthy way. And so the knee-jerk reaction was, let's dump the name, we'll take some time off, and we'll rethink everything we're doing. I think at the heart of what was going on was that we were not being accepted on a local level by our musical peers. And there's all sorts of reasons why that happens. But that was probably like any young band getting their start. That's something you crave. And because we weren't getting it, I think there was a desire to get it. And so rather than just sort of dig deeper and do what might have been best, in my mind, looking back, which would have been saying, let's just decide what we want to do and do it well, and not really worry as much about what other people are thinking. The reaction was, very much the opposite. Let's kill the whole thing. Let's take some time off, and then we'll reemerge the way that we want to be. So that was that. I'm not sure I did a great job explaining that, but that was sort of the as far as I can see, looking back, what we were thinking at the time and what kind of led to the name change and sort of the rebirth of us as a band.
Now, when you decided, when Paper Lions was born and you started to come back, did you find it easier to start navigating those industry waters again, or did you kind of have to start back at square one?
Well, I think things sort of came together fairly easily for us. We took about 18 months off when we wrote an EP called Trophies. We released that, and that was fairly well received. So, I mean, it never felt like it was a big struggle to kind of kickstart things again. That's for sure. There were some differences in the sort of the philosophy of what we were trying to do. So some of those industry connections weren't as relevant to the new version of the band anyway. I mean, things like we were sort of more gearing towards folk festivals and the kind of folk scene in a rocky kind of way earlier on in the band. But then with the birth of Paper Lions, we were very much going for just being a rock band, a pop rock band. And so some of those contexts weren't as relevant for Paper Lions anyway. But I mean, certainly looking back, I'd say it was we never felt like becoming Paper Lions and trying to launch that was an uphill battle.
Well, you mentioned the Trophies EP, and I don't want to talk to you about that because that was kind of the first time that your band came on my radar, and I know that's true for a lot of other people. And it's one of those interesting stories where you guys created and kind of self-released this EP for free for your website, and it exploded. People all over the world were talking about it, and so I'm curious, like when you were getting ready to release Trophies, how did you get the word out? Did you expect it to have the kind of big impact that it did right out the gate, or is there some secret to the formula out there that other artists should be using themselves?
That was another one of those happy accidents. We had originally partnered with a small label out of Toronto, Ontario, to help with the release of Trophies. And, it went relatively well, I suppose. But then within a few months, it was clear that, strange things were happening. And as a little bit more time unfolded, that company ended up closing its Canadian division. And so we weren't exactly sure what to think of that, although we didn't really think about it that much. But time went on, and we didn't hear from them. We weren't getting a check, although hard to say exactly how much money might have been owed. But
more than nothing.
Certainly more than nothing, that's for sure.
Exactly.
And so I think maybe a year had passed, and we thought, well, we're still really proud of this EP, and if we're not getting any money for it, and money may be a roadblock for people discovering the EP, and therefore discovering the band, then why don't we just give it away for free, since no money's coming to us anyway. And so we thought, well, the only reason we wouldn't do this is because it would be annoying to existing fans who had already bought the record. And so we drafted this letter to the fans who had purchased the record saying, essentially, thank you for purchasing it. Because we didn't actually get that money, we've decided now we're going to give it away for free. Sorry if this bothers you, but we really just want to get the music out. And then there was, basically, I think, a short explanation about what happened with the label and the label closing its doors and us not getting the money. So we posted this open letter on our website to our fans, and the next morning, and then at the bottom of that letter there was a download link. People could download the album. And the next morning, it just exploded. I think it got posted on Reddit, and that was sort of the big push behind it. And it started this very large conversation about labels screwing over artists, of which a lot of people felt, we were just one of, many, many artists throughout the history who have been screwed over by labels. And so we sort of became the torchbearers of the I guess, of the screwed over artists. I'm not really sure how else to explain
No,
it.
I get what you're trying to say.
And so, but through that, I mean, there was, maybe 150,000 hits to that letter on the website, and I think 30,000 downloads of the album in the next 3 days.
Wow.
And it really became this thing that, I think, I'm hoping after you hear the backstory, like there was nothing, we had no idea that was going to happen. I mean, to us, in our minds, this was to the, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people who had purchased trophies saying like, hey, sorry if this bugs you, but we never actually got your money, so we want to give it away for free now. But it became something much, much bigger.
Oh, that's great to hear, man. And you guys had already had a lot of success. You found a lot of success as a band there, both in your own country and outside of it. So I can only imagine that kind of helped usher in a new wave of fans and interest and people demanding to, support you in other ways through tours or back catalog or whatever it may be.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the irony is that, and actually, even some people, there were sort of conspiracy theorists that put forth the idea that this was a big ploy constructed by us and our label to launch the EP in a bigger way, which is pretty funny. We're not near that clever. So.
But to say, I mean, it's not a bad idea on paper anyways. Like the theory, like,
No.
yeah, I guess that does work, but guys...
Well, other than the fact that the most common rebuttal to that, which I would tend to agree with, is that, that works great in the artist's favor.
Yeah.
But, unless
True.
the label's only planning on releasing that one band, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot there.
Very true. Very true. Well, let's talk about the new music, because I want to get there with you. And like I said, I'm at a little bit of an advantage to most people because I've been able to hear a lot of full color, or at least how far you've gotten in full color. Do you have a release date for the record in mind yet?
We are still nailing it down. Of course, we're on to the second single now, and it's looking like there will be a number of singles released by the time the record comes out. We're looking at early fall now, with basically another 3 singles set to come out, one every 6 weeks or so for the next 4 or 5 months.
So what's the most recent single?
First there was Believer, and
Yes.
Callback, the second single, just came out a week or 2 ago.
Yeah, I think that one came out just as you guys were getting ready to head down to Austin, where we both were, but we completely missed each other.
Yes, that festival is crazy. I'm not surprised we could not connect. It's hard to connect with my own bandmates at that festival.
Yeah, was this? Have you guys done South by before this year?
This was our 4th year doing it.
No, and I think it was maybe my 8th year this time. It never gets less crazy.
No, exactly. I mean, I think some of the anxiety sort of subsides year after year, but the reality is it is just an insane music festival, and that does not change.
But you guys have been a few times, so you seem to enjoy it. You seem to find some value in going down there.
Yes, yeah, it seems every year. I mean, there's sort of the 2 sides to the festival. You're going down to build a fan base, not just in Austin, but of course there's people from all over the world coming to your shows. So it's a great way to just perform in front of new people. But then there's the industry side of it as well, and sort of building contacts. And it seems like every year, well, of course, we're strengthening relationships with people that we have met through the years, so that's great. It's a great way to just get in front of people that we are friends and colleagues with. But then as well, it does seem like there's a handful of connections that we create each year that become very meaningful to us as a band.
Well, I was able to catch a set. We weren't able to talk, but I do love the way you guys sound live, and I hope that when you guys are able to tour in the States here once the new album's done, that I can hear more of this record, because I love what you're doing with this new album, and I think a lot of people are as well. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we have the 2 songs that are out now. What are the 3 singles on the horizon? Because I think "Don't Want to Dance" might be one of the best songs you've ever written.
Wow. Well, thank you. Don't exactly know what the singles are. I know I could certainly rhyme off contenders. My Number is a contender. Take a Look at My Girl is a contender. Don't Want to Dance is a contender. And then potentially one of the ballads. There's End of July and Best Out of You. And there's actually another song or two that we're still finishing that potentially could be contenders as well. So it's really hard to say. We know that with each single that we release, we want to, continue to build on the story of the album and let people know that this is something new. We are, we're stepping it up this time. We're really going for it. And so we want those 4 or 5 series of singles to kind of paint that picture so people have an idea of the range of sounds on the record.
Well, something that really caught me off guard when I was listening to it the first time is I feel like there's a lot of bands and a lot of records today that when they come out, you listen to them and you think, oh, this is this band doing their version of band X or band X and Y put together. But it seems like the influences you guys have going into this record are so all over the place that there are things you can pinpoint. Like I feel like there's a little bit of there's some throwback pop sounds in there, and there's some synth that people could definitely tie to like 80s pop rock. But to you, like, what do you think are the biggest influences for you on this album? Because to me, it seems like it's all over the place in a good way, where it kind of keeps you on your toes, and you can't really pinpoint what is necessarily behind what you're writing. So for you, what influenced the creation of Full Color?
It's definitely a sort of a buffet of sounds, if you will. Certainly, we were listening to a lot of the brighter sides of 80s pop and taking inspiration from that. But it's like you go from the 80s to now. We were taking a lot of inspiration from pop in general, and I know that's a very broad statement. But it might make more sense to kind of talk a little bit about the creative process, and that might shed some light on sort of how we came to arrive at the sounds that we chose. We ended up renting a friend's studio for 3 days a week for the last 18 months. And so songwriting and creating a record almost became like this 9-to-5 job in the best way possible. We would come, arrive at the studio, and someone would have, this nugget of an idea. And rather than sort of develop it as a live band, we would just start recording it right away. And some of the sounds would be placeholders, just to quickly get something going, you'd just throw on an electronic beat or something, just because it would be much faster than tracking real drums. But then, throughout the day, you would just allow the idea to go wherever it wanted to go. And so I think a big part of that was because we were writing so much, and no one came saying this idea needs to be on the record. It really freed us up to allow the song to go wherever it wanted to go and to just try whatever sounds we wanted to on it. And so whether that was, sort of some of the sounds that would be nostalgic sounds, like, some of those like gated drums and that type of thing, or, some of these more kind of like cheesy early 2000s synthesized sounds. We just weren't afraid to go there because we thought, well, if this stinks, it doesn't need to go on the record. We've got enough material here that we can fully explore this without being afraid of what it might sound like in the end. We stumbled onto that process, but it was, looking back, like completely instrumental in changing the way that we write. And changing, I think, the way that our records are going to sound like with this next record and then in future records. Being less afraid to just just go for it and have a lot of fun and put down whatever sounds make you feel good and feel right. It's such a liberating process. So that's a little bit of the kind of, I don't know, the philosophical side of what's going on the record. So then beyond that, we would just, as far as like specifically what was influencing us, it's hard to really say beyond just whatever we happen to be listening to that week that got you excited. You would go into the studio and maybe channel that. But it really, I would say, it's the best of pop from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. That whole, various spectrums of sounds were kind of, finding their way onto the record.
I really like that idea that you mentioned of being in the studio and instead of sitting there kind of tinkering around with a song, someone bringing in an idea and just diving into it and seeing where it goes. Has that always been how you guys have kind of developed songs, or is that kind of new to this record?
No, that's definitely new to this record. And I think it's, a process that I'm not sure, well, it's hard to say exactly what the future holds, but I'm not sure we would go back from this process, because it really is very liberating, and it's a really rewarding process. I mean, to come with an idea and then to have something at the end of the day that sounds like the proper song is just a really satisfying way to write.
Now, outside of finishing the record and getting it out there, what other kinds of plans do you have as a band for the year? Do you guys tour a lot? Do you get outside of Canada much? What is the rest of 2016 looking like for Paper Lions?
Once the record comes out, which is looking like early fall, we'll be touring for the remainder of the fall, and then probably for the next 18 to 24 months we'll be performing. I know we'll obviously be performing across Canada, but then as well in the States and Australia, and then doing key shows in other markets like the UK and Europe.
I mean, that sounds wonderful. You guys have been able to amass this kind of very large global following, especially thanks to the internet. So I was curious about how often you're actually able to get out there and play for your fans kind of all over the world, because you are located in such an unusual place to find a band that has such large reach.
Yeah, it's really expensive.
I guess that was kind of what I was getting at. It must be expensive.
Yeah, it is. And the beauty of the internet is that, of course, it's free to spread your music worldwide. In that it's someone in Russia can stream your song on YouTube just as easily as someone in Brazil. But to fly to Moscow to play a show is very expensive. And beyond that, there's not a guarantee that you have enough fans in any given city to actually break even, and then hopefully make some money on the show and the tour. Something that we have found is that while we have a large fan base, it's geographically very diverse, and so what we're trying to figure out now is how do we, if we have 50 fans in 1,000 cities, how do we make that work regarding a tour? Because you can't really go and play to, well, you can go and play to 50 people, but it doesn't, economically, it doesn't really work out when you're trying to fly. And then just even the way that we're performing the new show, it needs to be done in a bigger room. Otherwise like we use a catwalk in the latest show. And if you're in a little club, the catwalk's going to take up the whole thing, quite frankly. So, logistically, that's what we're trying to figure out right now. How do we take this record in the live setting and reproduce it across the world in a way that we're not going bankrupt?
The struggles of all rock bands, right?
Of course.
Well, I appreciate that you guys try to make the live experience unique from the record as opposed to just playing it. You do bring a production to what you're doing in a live show.
Absolutely, and really the live show is a byproduct of the record. We got close to finishing the record. Well, I guess we're still finishing it, but last fall we were to the point where we felt like, we might be close to done here. And we started thinking about what kind of show will serve this record well. We had spent so much time, energy, and love, really, getting this record to the point where we could all say, this is something we're all really proud of. We thought, well, we really need to give that same sort of attention to the live show. And so that translated into a live show recording we actually did last November, where we played pretty much the whole record live, and we filmed it. If you've seen the music video for Believer, that's that show that we played.
Oh, okay, yes.
And so it was a really exciting process, actually, thinking like, how do we really step things up with this show? And of course, that translated into all sorts of, I think of them as moments in the show that we hadn't explored before, like fairly classic confetti, disco ball, projections, and the catwalk, and just these things that kind of, make going to a live show fun and memorable. And so that was, the live show came from that sort of same place that the record came from. And it's just really fun. And I like having fun, and I like when I'm looking out at the crowd of people and they're all smiling. I mean, that's just it's a wonderful experience to be a part of.
Well, I'm hoping a lot of people get to see it once this record's done, because I believe in the new album. Is the new album only going to have the 9 songs that I've heard, or I think you hinted at maybe there's more tracks that you're completing still?
There will be 2 or 3 others as well.
All right, well, you're 9 songs deep. You're 9 for 9 so far. So good
Great.
start.
Glad to hear it.
Let me ask you this. Looking to the future, what are your goals for Paper Lions? Because you guys have over a decade under your belt between the 2 projects at this point. You've reached fans around the world. You've had some viral success. You're able to play shows all over the place. You have been able to bring in your own production to it, and not just play music, but kind of make it an event. So when you look to the horizon, are you hoping to accomplish or achieve, or what have you, moving forward with the band?
Well, we hope to, or we plan to continue making records, continue to perform live shows. I think we will continue to do it as long as we feel like with each record and with each tour we're stepping up creatively and we're enjoying it. As long as those 2 things are working in tandem, we'll continue to do it. But I think all of us feel like, in a lot of ways, we're just scratching the surface with this latest record because of the sort of new processes that we discovered. Armed with the knowledge that we now have, I think it'll be very exciting to get back into the studio and to work on the follow-up record, to Full Color.
I always find that when an artist gets really excited about the album they're about to release, or the one that they've been working on for a long time, that tends to kind of fire up the juices, and they're like, well, I'm ready to do the next album as well. When you get so close to finishing the first one, you're like, I'm ready. I've got another set of ideas ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and like you said, that is probably quite typical of most artists. That's certainly, to a degree, always the way we've been. But it's part of the, I don't know what you'd call it, the creative game. It's like, unfortunately, there's no, other than self-imposed, there's no real benchmark. There's no ceiling. And so you're always chasing that next thing. I think that for us, what will be key is to sort of be satisfied with what we have done thus far and what we are doing right now. And then balancing that with that hunger for more, and that hunger to create, bigger and better and deeper and stronger.
Well, I think you're on the cusp of doing all of those things. I think that this record could be the big one for you guys. Not that you even need it at this point, because it seems like you've established yourselves to such a point where, as long as you at least maintain the status quo, so to say, that your fans are going to be there and you're going to be able to keep making music. And really, at the end of the day, what more can you ask for? Am I right?
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I'm so happy that you guys have been letting me hear the mixes of the album so far. I really like them. Don't Want to Dance is one that we have had on repeat here at Holics a bunch. I can't wait for you to officially release it so that we can share it with people. But in the meantime, we will need a song for this episode of the podcast. So which one of the singles do you think we should show people, maybe to help introduce them to what the band is all about?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. What would be your pick?
That's tough, man. I think Believer's a great song, but I don't know. I like both the singles on this record, and I like a lot of the back catalog stuff. I feel like it should be one of the new ones, obviously, because that's kind of what this year is all about, is full color. So between the two that are out right now, do you have one that you like a little more than the other?
I don't think personally, but I mean, why don't we go with Callback? That's the latest one. As far as kind of doing something a little bit different from what we had done in the past, Callback might achieve that a bit more than Believer.
Okay, tell us just real quick maybe a little bit about the story behind that song, give people a little context for what's happening in the track.
Yeah, well, the big thing with Callback is, we had this kind of, I don't even know what you'd call it, maybe this jazzy piano riff that kind of, it's almost like slightly show tuney, the sort of dump, 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 and brought that to the band. And then we sort of wrote this kind of almost like sort of Motown-y chorus to go along with it. And that's what the song sort of launches into, is that chorus. And then it, really kicks into this like drum and vocal part where we were just channeling, I don't even know, like almost Queen or something, really just wanting to have this powerful moment that would translate well in a live setting. But I mean, really the whole song, I know what we were going for was just to capture that feeling of fun and excitement.
And again, I think you hit it on the head, and I hope our fans agree, because I know a lot of people listening to this show might have heard the name Paper Lions, but here stateside I found, especially with the younger demographics, there's still a lot of people kind of getting accustomed to your music, finding you, discovering you, and I'm hoping this podcast helps further that recognition. You guys deserve it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, well, thanks for having us on, and glad you're digging the new record.
Definitely. Now, if people want to follow the band online, or what's the best way to keep up with everything going on in your lives?
Paperlions.com has all of the links to social, all that kind of stuff. We're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and each of those are kind of run by a different band member, so you get a slightly different flavor of whatever happens to be happening that day.
Oh, I like that.
So that's probably your best bet if you're, whatever your sort of preferences for social sites. We're on most of them.
Well, I like the sound of that. I like the idea of giving people a bunch of different perspectives on the group, because when one person runs it, you tend to have that one voice of the band, and the unified voice can be nice, but you're a group of guys who all see the world in a different way. It's kind of cool that you let that slip into how you present the band to the public.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I'm going to let you get off the phone now, but I thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's been a great while. I can't believe we did 50 minutes this fast. It kind of flew by on us.
Yeah, well, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I wish you the best of luck with this album, and I'm hoping that Max, your guy at Marauder, will keep me up to date with all the new mixes of the record as it comes along. And yeah, hopefully maybe we can chat again when you're getting ready to release it, so we can tell people where to see you and how to find it and all that jazz.
Awesome.
All right. Have a great day, man.
Yeah, you too, James. See ya.